Machiavelli would never tell the unsupported man to wait until the world becomes fair. He would tell him to become less dependent on fairness. Because the man with no support cannot afford the same mistakes as the man with money, connections, and a safety net. He must become more disciplined, more strategic, more difficult to replace, and far more careful about where he places his future. If nobody is coming, your success needs different laws, because your real problem is not loneliness. It is exposure. When you have no financial safety net, one bad decision costs more. When you have no influential family, nobody makes the phone call that opens the door. When you have no powerful network, your mistakes are not quietly repaired by somebody above you. And when nobody believes in what you are building, you carry another burden. You begin questioning whether they are right. That is the private war of the unsupported man. You believe you are capable of more. But the world is looking at your current evidence, your current income, your current position, your current results, your current reputation. And those two versions of you are not the same man yet. That gap is where resentment begins. And if you are not careful, resentment will convince you that being unsupported makes you special. It does not. No support does not create power. Constraint creates pressure. What you do with that pressure determines whether it becomes power. Pressure can turn into skill, proof, leverage, and freedom. Or it can turn into anger, fantasy, bitterness, and excuses dressed up as philosophy. This is the difference most men never understand. You can be disciplined and still be weak. You can make money and still be controlled. You can gain status and still depend on one employer, one platform, one client, one relationship, one gatekeeper, or one approval source. You can look successful from the outside and still be structurally owned. By the end of this video, you will know whether you are building success or simply building a more comfortable form of dependence. Law 1. Accept the position before trying to escape it. Machiavellian realism begins with terrain, not emotion, not ego, terrain. Where are you actually standing? Most unsupported men want to escape before they measure. They want the new identity before they inspect the old conditions. They want to think like future millionaires while refusing to look at a bank account that says they are financially exposed. They call themselves entrepreneurs without customers. They call themselves disciplined without measurable output. They call themselves underestimated when they may simply still be unproven. That distinction matters. Being underestimated means the world has mispriced your ability. Being unproven means the world has not yet received enough evidence to update its judgment. One is an injustice. The other is a strategic problem. If you confuse the two, you will spend years demanding recognition from people who are not obligated to believe in a version of you that reality has not confirmed. A strategist does not defend his ego from information. He uses information to choose his next move. So, your first move is not motivation. It is inventory. Measure your money, measure your skill, measure your time, measure your obligations, measure your network, measure your reputation, measure your health, measure your health, measure your opportunities. Do not ask whether the numbers feel fair. Ask whether they are useful. How much money do you actually have? How many months could you survive without your current income? What skill can you sell today, not someday? Who trusts your work? Who knows you exist? What obligations consume your energy? What location advantages do you have? What does your current reputation open for you? And what does it silently close? This is not self-hatred. This is war mapping. Machiavelli understood that fantasy is expensive when power is at stake. A ruler who misreads terrain loses armies. A man who misreads his life loses years. If you do not know your position, your ambition becomes theatrical. You can speak powerfully, post confidently, and imagine victory, while still making decisions from blindness. Write the truth down. Not the inspiring version. Not the version you would tell a woman, a friend, a parent, or a follower. The useful version. Your position has 4 battlefields: money, skill, trust, and time. If money is weak, you are exposed to desperation. If skill is weak, you are replaceable. If trust is weak, nobody gives you responsibility. If time is weak, your ambition has no operating space. And if all 4 are weak, you are not building from zero. You are building from danger. The payoff is simple. You cannot escape a position you refuse to measure. And once the position is visible, the next question becomes dangerous. How easily could your entire plan be destroyed? Law 2. Protect your survival base. Unsupported men are often seduced by dramatic risk. Quit immediately, burn the ships, bet everything, go all in. It sounds powerful because it carries the costume of courage. But sometimes it is simply bad architecture. A man with wealthy parents can survive a catastrophic experiment. A man with family property can retreat when the business fails. A man with a connected network can recover from a public mistake because someone important still vouches for him. But a man with no backup cannot pretend those situations are equal. The unsupported man does not have the luxury of romantic stupidity. Machiavelli understood fortuna, the force of chance, uncertainty, and changing conditions. He wrote that fortune is the ruler of half our actions. Then he compared fortune to a violent river. When the river floods, resistance may be impossible. But when conditions are calm, men can build dams and barriers so the next flood causes less destruction. That is not cowardice, that is preparation. Your dam may be essential savings, lower fixed costs, reduced unnecessary debt, insurance where appropriate. A second monetizable skill, another client, another distribution channel, a portfolio that proves your competence, or simply enough cash that desperation does not make decisions for you, because desperation destroys negotiation. A man who must accept the offer cannot negotiate the offer. A man who cannot leave the job is partly owned by the job. A man who cannot survive one bad month does not possess freedom. He possesses income. There is a difference. Income means money is entering your life. Power means one interruption does not immediately make you obedient. This is where pride ruins unsupported men. They confuse suffering with strength. They wear exhaustion like a medal. They brag about having no safety net, as if exposure is masculinity. But exposure is not power. Exposure is a condition that must be corrected. Do not take pride in being reckless because you had no safety net. Build the safety net yourself. Protect housing. Protect health. Protect basic cash flow. Protect your ability to stay in the game. Before you chase the dramatic move, make sure one emergency cannot erase your entire future. You are not less ambitious because you prepare. You are more dangerous because you survive long enough to compound. A reckless man may look brave for 1 month. A prepared man can apply pressure for years, but survival is only defensive power. It prevents collapse. It does not create dominance. Eventually, you must turn isolation into offensive power. And this is where most unsupported men waste years. Law 3. Turn solitude into production. Loneliness is not discipline. Silence is not progress. Isolation is not superiority. A man can spend 5 years alone and become weaker every year. He watches videos about discipline, reads philosophy, studies betrayal, analyzes human nature, imagines future revenge, builds nothing. That is not solitude. That is consumption without witnesses. The unsupported man often hides inside isolation because isolation protects his ego. Nobody sees the inconsistent routine. Nobody sees the unfinished work. Nobody sees the hours lost to entertainment. Nobody sees the fantasy life where he is already powerful, respected, disciplined, and undeniable. But reality does not reward the private movie in your head. Reality rewards what becomes visible outside your imagination. The only question that matters is this: what is your isolation producing? If your isolation produces rumination, resentment, and addiction to stimulation, it is not making you stronger. It is quietly training you to live inside your own excuses. If your isolation produces finished work, measurable output, sharper skill, better health, clearer judgment, and visible evidence, then solitude becomes a weapon. Create a solitary production system. A fixed start time. A fixed block of protected attention. One measurable daily output. One meaningful weekly artifact. One monthly review. For a writer, the unit may be finished pages or completed video outlines. For a programmer, deployed projects. For a salesman, qualified conversations. For a creator, published content. For a designer, portfolio pieces. For a business owner, customer acquisition. Do not make the mistake of measuring effort by how intense it feels. Measure it by what survives after the feeling is gone. Your pain is not an asset until it changes your behavior. Your isolation is not an asset until it creates something that can be inspected. This is where the unsupported man begins to separate from the fantasy version of himself. He stops asking, "Am I alone?" He starts asking, "What did I produce while alone?" That question is brutal because it removes the romance. It forces the truth into the room. You may discover that your solitude has been producing nothing but opinions, saved posts, private anger, and plans that never touched the market. Good. Now you have information. Stop calling yourself unsupported as though it were an identity. You are a producer operating without applause. That is different. And if this truth cuts deeper than you expected, then do not pretend you need more motivation. You need a system that removes false progress. On Patreon, I build the deeper frameworks for men who are done confusing thought with movement, private breakdowns on proof, positioning, discipline, funnels, leverage, and self-command. It is not for spectators who want another emotional high. It is for men ready to turn private ambition into visible evidence. The decision is yours. Production creates the raw material for the next law. Because output alone is not enough. If the market cannot price your value, your effort remains invisible. Law 4, acquire a skill that creates leverage. The unsupported man cannot afford to remain generic. If your only advantage is that you work hard, you are competing with millions of other hard-working men. Hard work is necessary, but hard work alone does not change your bargaining position. A replaceable man can work hard for years and still remain replaceable because effort without scarcity becomes expected, not rewarded. You need a capability that changes how others calculate your value. Ask a colder question. What can I do that creates measurable value for another human being or organization? Can you sell? Can you write? Can you code? Can you edit? Can you design? Can you negotiate? Can you build systems? Can you generate demand? Can you analyze data? Can you lead people? Can you solve technical problems? Can you create distribution? But do not choose a skill because it sounds impressive. Choose a skill that passes one of 4 tests. It must make money. It must open access. It must create visible proof, or it must build distribution. If a skill does none of those things, it may be interesting, but it is not leverage. The unsupported man must think this way because he cannot rely on inherited credibility. He cannot enter rooms simply because his name carries weight. He cannot assume someone will introduce him, protect him, sponsor him, or explain his potential to the right person. His skill must become the introduction. This is why being useful is not enough. You must become useful in a way that can be measured, positioned, and remembered. A man who writes but cannot connect writing to attention, trust, persuasion, or revenue will struggle to be valued. A designer who understands beauty but not conversion remains vulnerable. A programmer who can build but cannot communicate with clients loses range. A creator who can speak but does not understand storytelling, retention, distribution, and audience economics becomes another voice shouting into the void. Combination creates scarcity. A writer who understands psychology becomes harder to replace. A designer who understands conversion becomes more valuable. A salesman who understands content becomes more dangerous. A creator who understands systems stops depending on inspiration. A technician who understands communication enters higher value rooms. This is where the fox and the lion matter. Machiavelli wrote that the lion cannot protect himself from snares. His point was not that force is useless. His point was that force without perception is incomplete. The ruler needed the strength of the lion and the cunning awareness of the fox. Modern translation. Competence without strategy gets exploited. Strategy without competence becomes empty manipulation. You need both, real capability and the intelligence to position it. Do not ask, how can I become important? Ask, what difficult problem can I become unusually good at solving? Solve expensive problems and status begins following usefulness. But usefulness alone still does not guarantee recognition because the world cannot reward evidence it cannot see. Law 5. Build proof before seeking recognition. This law will injure your pride if you have spent years saying, "Nobody sees my potential." Potential is private. Proof is public. Potential says, "I could." Proof says, "I did." This is why explaining your ambition feels so exhausting. You are trying to use words to borrow credibility from a future that has not happened yet. You are asking people to emotionally invest in a version of you that reality has not verified. And every time they doubt you, you feel insulted because you confuse their refusal to believe with their inability to see. But most people are not studying your soul. They are reading your evidence. Stop demanding belief from people who have not seen proof. Build the artifact. Publish the result. Get the customer. Show the case study. Finish the transformation. Document the metric. Create something reality can inspect. Consider Jan Koum. At 16, Koum immigrated to the United States from Ukraine with his mother. They relied on government assistance and food stamps. He worked menial jobs, studied computer networking, eventually spent nearly 9 years at Yahoo, and transformed technical competence into WhatsApp. By 2012, WhatsApp reportedly had around 90 million users. In 2014, Facebook announced the acquisition in a deal worth roughly $19 billion at the time. Look at the sequence. The pressure was poverty and limited resources. The response was not resentment. It was skill acquisition. The first meaningful proof was not billionaire status. It was competence valuable enough to enter the technology industry, followed by a product millions of people voluntarily used. Only after the proof became undeniable did extraordinary leverage arrive. That is the pattern you need to understand. Pressure, skill, proof, leverage. Not pressure, anger, fantasy, recognition. This is where many unsupported men poison their own future. They want the emotional reward before the evidence exists. They tell everyone they are building a company, and for 20 minutes they feel like entrepreneurs. They announce the new discipline routine, and for one evening they feel transformed. They describe the man they will become, and the brain receives a small reward for an identity reality has not yet confirmed. There is even psychological evidence for being careful about premature identity recognition. In 4 experiments published in Psychological Science, Peter Gollwitzer and colleagues found that when other people noticed identity-related intentions, those intentions were sometimes translated into action less intensely. Public recognition could create a premature sense of already possessing the desired identity. That does not mean never discuss a goal. It means understand the danger of receiving the emotional reward before earning the evidence. The unsupported man cannot afford that drug. Your rule is simple. Talk less about identity. Produce more evidence of identity. Do not lead with, believe in me. Lead with, here is what I built. Do not beg people to understand your vision. Build until their misunderstanding becomes irrelevant. Do not ask the world to respect your potential. Create proof that makes disrespect look irrational. But proof creates another problem. Once you become useful, the temptation is to believe you no longer need anyone. That mistake can turn strength into isolation. And Machiavelli would recognize it immediately. Law 6. Build strategic allies, not emotional dependence. Self-reliance is not the same as self-isolation. The objective is not to become the man who says, "I need nobody." That sounds strong until you notice that every serious business, institution, movement, fortune, and political order depends on coordinated human capability. Power rarely grows alone. It grows through aligned incentives, controlled trust, useful exchange, reputation, and structure. The stronger question is not, can I avoid needing people? The stronger question is, can I cooperate without surrendering ownership of myself? That is the difference between dependence and alliance. Dependence says, I need this person to approve of me, rescue me, choose me, or validate me. Alliance says, we exchange value because our incentives align. The unsupported man must learn this distinction because emotional hunger makes him vulnerable. If he has spent years ignored, the first person who believes in him may become too powerful in his mind. If he has spent years without guidance, the first mentor figure may become a substitute father. If he has spent years without recognition, the first opportunity may feel like salvation. And what feels like salvation can become ownership. Build relationships around reciprocity. Ask 4 questions. What can I genuinely offer? What capability, access, knowledge, or credibility does this person possess? Where do our incentives align? Does value move in both directions? You do not need hundreds of powerful friends. You need a small number of competent people whose character has survived evidence. And there is another rule. Do not build relationships only upward. A man who only networks with people above him reveals hunger. He becomes easy to read, easy to delay, easy to ignore. Build sideways, help competent peers. Create value before asking for favors. Become the person whose name is associated with usefulness, reliability, discretion, and delivery. The unsupported man must not romanticize permanent isolation. Total self-sufficiency is strategically fragile. One closed door can become a wall. One betrayal can remove your only path. One employer can control your income. One platform can erase your reach. One client can break your company. One relationship can destabilize your mind if you built your entire emotional structure around it. Machiavelli's political thought was far more sophisticated than the caricature of one ruthless individual controlling everyone. His discourses paid serious attention to laws, institutions, competing interests, and durable political structures. The lesson is simple. Power that depends entirely on one personality is fragile. Build structure. Build reputation. Build reciprocal relationships. Build enough value that cooperation does not feel like begging. The unsupported man does not need emotional dependence. He needs strategic allies. But even allies are not the final form of power, because the last trap is not failure. The last trap is succeeding in a way that still leaves someone else holding the key. Law 7. Convert success into independence. Imagine you finally win. You earn serious money. Your channel grows. Your company expands. People respect you. You enter rooms that once ignored you. The same people who doubted you begin speaking more carefully. Your family becomes quieter. Your friends update their tone. Strangers assign authority to your name. Now answer one question. What happens if the gatekeeper changes his mind? If one employer controls your income, your salary is not sovereignty. If one customer controls your company, your revenue is vulnerable. If one platform owns your entire audience, your followers are rented access. If your status disappears when your title disappears, you never own the status. If your lifestyle requires every future month to go perfectly, you are not wealthy. You are expensive. This is the final transformation. Income must become reserves. Skill must become transferable skill. Work must become reputation. Attention must become owned distribution. Success must create alternatives, because alternatives change human behavior. The man who can leave negotiates differently. The man with savings tolerates less exploitation. The creator with direct access to his audience fears algorithms less. The professional with visible proof fears one employer less. The entrepreneur with multiple customers fears one customer less. You cannot remove uncertainty. You can reduce the number of people who can destroy your future with one decision. That is the difference between success and power. Success means you obtain something valuable. Power means you are increasingly capable of keeping your position, adapting when conditions change, and refusing terms that would once have controlled you. This is why no support does not automatically make you powerful. What matters is what you construct, because support is absent. Isolation must become structure. Structure must create discipline. Discipline must create skill. Skill must create proof. Proof must create leverage. Leverage must create options. And options must create sovereignty. You are not powerful because nobody came to save you. Do not romanticize that. You become powerful when you stop structuring your future around the assumption that somebody eventually will. There is a weaker version of you still waiting. Waiting for the family to understand. Waiting for friends to believe. Waiting for the mentor to appear. Waiting for the economy to improve. Waiting for confidence. Waiting for permission. That man can wait for 10 more years. The world will not interrupt him. Your stronger identity begins when the question changes. Not, who will support me? But, what can I build that reduces how much support I require? Not, why am I ignored? But, what proof would make ignoring me irrational? Not, who will save me from uncertainty? But, what dam am I building before the river rises? That is Machiavellian success without the childish mythology. No paranoia, no manipulation theater, no revenge fantasy, no worship of loneliness, no pretending that pain automatically creates greatness, just accurate terrain, protected downside. Disciplined solitude, scarce skill, visible proof, strategic allies, and independence. This is the doctrine for the unsupported man. You may have been doubted, you may have been ignored, you may have been left without a map, without a sponsor, without a safety net, without applause. But none of that gives you permission to become bitter, vague, reckless, or dependent on sympathy. Your pride must become cleaner than that. Your self-respect must become harder than that. The unsupported man does not beg the world to be kinder. He becomes less dependent on its kindness. Choose one law, not 7. 1. Apply it for the next 30 days. Measure your position. Protect your base. Build a production system. Acquire a leverage skill. Create proof. Build one reciprocal alliance. Convert one piece of success into more independence. But do not announce the identity before you have evidence. Do not tell everyone what you are becoming. Give them proof later. No support, no permission. Build anyway.